Danielle Stone had given Mitchell Crawford and Associates 7 years of her life. 7 years of 60-hour weeks, skipped lunches, canceled vacations. She'd started as a junior accountant fresh out of college, and now, at 31, she was the senior financial analyst, the backbone of the firm's most profitable division. Her desk faced the floor-to-ceiling windows of the downtown Chicago high-rise, but she rarely looked at the view. Numbers were her view. Balance sheets, profit margins, audit reports. She loved the precision of it, the way everything had to add up perfectly. "Danielle, got a minute?" Mitchell Crawford stood in her doorway, his 6-foot frame filling the space. At 48, he was everything a successful managing partner should be. Expensive suit, confident smile, silver streaking through his dark hair. He'd built this firm from nothing 20 years ago. "Of course, Mr. Crawford." "Mitchell, please. After 7 years, I think we're past formalities." His smile widened. "I wanted to tell you personally before the announcement goes out. We're promoting you to Director of Financial Operations. It comes with a significant raise, equity stake in the firm, and your own team." Danielle's heart soared. Director. Equity. Everything she'd worked for. I thank you. I don't know what to say." "You've earned it. No one works harder than you." He paused at her door. "Oh, and I'll need you to take the lead on the Meridian account. It's our biggest client. $50 million contract. I trust you completely with it." As he walked away, Danielle allowed herself a moment of pure joy. Finally, recognition, success. Everything was falling into place. She had no idea she'd just been handed a loaded gun aimed at her own head. The Meridian Group was a real estate conglomerate with holdings across 3 states. Their account was massive, complex, and extremely profitable for Crawford and Associates. Danielle threw herself into it with her characteristic intensity. Over the next month, she lived in spreadsheets, Meridian's quarterly reports, tax filings, investment portfolios. She worked late every night, often finding herself alone in the office at midnight, the city lights twinkling below. Mitchell checked in regularly, always supportive, always encouraging. "You're doing amazing work," he'd say, stopping by her desk with coffee. "Meridian's thrilled with your analysis." But something felt off. Small things at first. Numbers that didn't quite align. Investment returns that seemed too good to be true. She mentioned it to Mitchell casually one evening. "I'm seeing some irregularities in the Meridian real estate valuations. The numbers seem inflated by about 15%. Mitchell's expression didn't change. "Real estate valuations are always subjective. Different appraisers, different methods, nothing to worry about. But our job is to flag inconsistencies." "Danielle," his voice was firmer now, "Meridian is our biggest client. They've been audited by 3 different firms. Everything is legitimate. Don't create problems where none exist." She should have trusted her instincts. But Mitchell was the expert, the one with 20 years of experience. She filed away her concerns and kept working. That was her first mistake. It was a Thursday night in late October when Danielle found it. She'd stayed late to finish a report, and while cross-referencing some Meridian investment data, she accidentally opened the wrong file on the shared server. What she saw made her blood run cold. It was a separate set of books from Meridian, the real books, and they told a completely different story than the ones she'd been working with. The properties were overvalued by 40%, not 15%. Millions of fictitious revenue. Shell companies funnel money through offshore accounts. Tax fraud, securities fraud. A complete fabrication designed to inflate Meridian's value for an upcoming IPO. And Mitchell's signature was on every fraudulent document. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through page after page of evidence. This wasn't error. This was systematic, calculated fraud. And she'd been working on the public-facing reports that would be filed with the SEC, reports that would become part of a massive securities offering. If this went public with her name on those reports, she'd be implicated. She could lose her license, go to prison. She needed to think. She saved copies to a personal encrypted drive and went home, barely sleeping. The next morning, she requested a meeting with Mitchell. Mitchell's office was all dark wood and leather, designed to impress. Danielle sat across from him, her encrypted drive hidden in her bag, her heart pounding. "I found the real Meridian books, the ones showing the actual property values. Mitchell, this is fraud. Massive fraud." For a long moment, Mitchell said nothing. Then he leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Danielle, I'm going to be honest with you. I was hoping you wouldn't find those books." At least he wasn't denying it. "We have to report this. If we don't, we're complicit. We could go to prison." "No, Danielle. You could go to prison." The words hung in the air like poison. "What?" Mitchell's smile was cold now. "You've been the lead analyst on Meridian for 6 weeks. Your name is on every report filed with the SEC. Your signature is on the valuation assessments. If this comes out, you're the one who will take the fall." "But you created the fraud." "Prove it." He opened a folder on his desk. See, the interesting thing about digital records is how easy they are to manipulate. Timestamps, access logs, file creation dates, all of it can be adjusted by someone with the right access. Someone like, say, a director of financial operations with administrative privileges. Danielle felt sick. "You're framing me. I'm protecting myself and the firm. And honestly, Danielle, you made it easy. Working alone late at night, your fingerprints all over Meridian files. The narrative writes itself. Ambitious young director commits fraud to boost her performance metrics, secure her promotion." No one will believe that. Won't they? Mitchell pulled out more documents. "See, I have emails that will appear to be from you, discussing ways to inflate valuations. I have your digital signature on documents authorizing shell company transactions. I have evidence of you accessing offshore account information. And I have this." He slid a bank statement across the desk. "It shows $150,000 deposited into an account in your name at a Cayman Islands bank. I've never seen that account before in my life. But it exists, and it has your social security number, your information, and deposits that coincidentally align with Meridian's fraudulent transactions. You've been taking kickbacks. At least that's what the evidence will show. If you're feeling the tension right now, hit that subscribe button. This story is about to get even more intense, and you won't want to miss what happens next." Danielle couldn't breathe. The walls of Mitchell's office seemed to be closing in. 7 years. She'd given this man 7 years of loyalty, and he'd spent the last 6 weeks building an elaborate trap around her. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why me?" "Because I needed someone smart enough to make the fraud look legitimate, but naive enough to take the fall. You were perfect." He stood up, adjusting his cufflinks. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay quiet, continue working on the Meridian reports exactly as directed. When the IPO goes through, you'll resign quietly, citing burnout. I'll give you a generous severance and we'll part ways. And if I don't, then I release all of this evidence to the SEC, the FBI, and the press. You'll be arrested within 48 hours. The case against you is airtight. You'll lose your CPA license before trial even starts. You'll go to prison for 10-15 years minimum. Your career, your reputation, your entire life destroyed." Danielle's mind raced. She had the encrypted drive with the real evidence, but would anyone believe her against Mitchell's fabricated records? He'd been planning this for months, maybe years. He had resources, money, connections. She was one person against an empire. "I need to think about it," she whispered. "You have until Monday. That's 3 days. If you try to run, I'll know. If you try to copy any more files, I'll know. I'm watching everything you do, Danielle. Every email, every file access, every phone call. Don't test me." She stood on shaking legs and walked out of his office. In the elevator down to the parking garage, she finally let the tears come. That weekend was the longest of Danielle's life. She stayed in her small apartment, curtains drawn, trying to figure a way out of the trap Mitchell had built around her. She couldn't go to the police, not without solid proof that she wasn't the one behind the fraud. Mitchell had covered his tracks too well. Every piece of evidence pointed at her now. She couldn't run. Where would she go? And running would make her look guilty. She couldn't even confide in anyone. Mitchell had made it clear he was monitoring her communications. By Sunday night, despair had settled over her like a heavy blanket. She sat on her couch, staring at nothing, contemplating a future that seemed to hold only two options: become complicit in fraud, or go to prison for fraud she didn't commit. Then her phone buzzed, an email from an address she didn't recognize. Legal Justice 2024 at protonmail.com. Subject: I know what Mitchell did. Her heart stopped. She opened it with trembling hands. Ms. Stone, you don't know me, but I know what Mitchell Crawford is doing to you. I was his previous scapegoat. He destroyed my career 3 years ago with the same tactics he's using on you. If you want to fight back, reply to this email. Use an encrypted service. Trust no one. End of quote. She stared at the message for a long time. It could be a trap, another layer of Mitchell's manipulation, or it could be a lifeline. She had nothing left to lose. She created a new encrypted email account and replied, I'm listening. The response came within an hour. My name is James Chen. I was a senior analyst at Crawford & Associates from 2018 to 2021. Mitchell framed me for embezzling $300,000 from a client trust account. I lost my license, spent 18 months in prison, lost my wife, my house, everything. I've spent the last 2 years building evidence to prove my innocence and expose Mitchell. When I saw you get promoted to director, I knew you were next. He does this every 3 to 4 years, finds someone talented, sets them up to take the fall for his schemes, then moves on. Danielle's hands shook as she read. Why didn't you fight it? I tried. He had fabricated evidence, false testimony from coerced witnesses, and expensive lawyers. I had nothing. But I've been patient. I've been watching, and I've been collecting proof. Real proof. The kind that can't be fabricated. What kind of proof? Security footage from the office showing Mitchell accessing your computer late at night when you weren't there. Digital forensics showing the manipulation of timestamps on files, whistleblower testimony from a former Meridian executive who kept his own copies of the real books, offshore banking records that trace the fraud directly to Mitchell's personal accounts, not yours. I have everything, Danielle, but I couldn't use it because I needed one more thing. What? A witness. Someone currently inside who can testify to his methods. Someone he's actively framing right now. You. Danielle felt hope flicker for the first time in 3 days. What do I have to do? First, you need to play along. Go to work Monday. Tell Mitchell you'll cooperate. Then we build our case. Carefully, methodically. We document everything he does, every move he makes, and when we have enough, we don't go to the police. We go to the FBI. This is federal securities fraud. They'll handle it. How do I know I can trust you? You don't. But what choice do you have? He was right. She had no choice. Okay, she typed. I'm in. What's the plan? Monday morning, Danielle walked into Mitchell's office at 8 a.m. sharp. She'd barely slept, but she'd practiced her lines all night. I'll do it, she said, her voice flat. I'll stay quiet. I'll finish the Meridian reports. But I want $500,000 in severance when I resign, not whatever generous package you were planning.
Mitchell studied her carefully. She forced herself to meet his eyes, to show defeat, but also pragmatism. A person making the best of a terrible situation. Finally, he smiled. Done! See? I knew you were smart. This way, everyone wins. Everyone but the truth, she said quietly. The truth, Mitchell chuckled, is whatever we decide it is. Welcome to the real world, Danielle. She left his office and went to her desk. For the benefit of whatever monitoring systems Mitchell had in place, she began working on the Meridian reports exactly as directed. But she also began documenting everything. James had sent her a tiny device that looked like a USB drive, but was actually a sophisticated recording device. She wore it on a lanyard around her neck, disguised as a flash drive. It recorded everything within 15 feet, every conversation with Mitchell, every instruction to falsify data, every implicit and explicit threat. This is where revenge starts to take shape. If you're invested in seeing Mitchell get what he deserves, make sure you like this video and subscribe. Trust me, you won't believe where this goes. Over the next 3 weeks, Danielle played the role of complicit employee perfectly. She worked on the fraudulent Meridian reports, incorporated Mitchell's suggestions for inflating values, and acted every bit the trapped professional making the best of an impossible situation. But she was also building a case. James had equipped her with sophisticated tools. The recording device captured hundreds of hours of incriminating conversations. A hidden camera in her desk recorded Mitchell's late-night visits to her computer when he thought she'd gone home. She'd started leaving at 9 p.m., but returning through the back entrance at 10 p.m. to watch him work. He accessed her files, her email, even copying her digital signature to authorize fraudulent documents. They built a timeline showing exactly how Mitchell had constructed the frame. Every falsified email, every manipulated timestamp, every forged authorization. James also introduced her to Marcus Rivera, the former Meridian executive who'd been pushed out when he questioned the accounting practices. Marcus had kept his own records, knowing something was wrong. He'd been too afraid to come forward alone. But with Danielle and James, they had corroboration. Mitchell destroyed my career too, Marcus said when they met in a parking garage far from any Crawford and Associates surveillance. I tried to report the fraud internally. The next thing I knew, I was fired for performance issues, and Mitchell made sure I couldn't get hired anywhere else in the industry. He has connections everywhere. Not everywhere, James said grimly, and not for much longer. The strain of living a double life was crushing Danielle. Every day at work, she had to smile at Mitchell, take his instructions, pretend to be defeated. Every night, she reviewed recordings, compiled evidence, and planned with James. She stopped seeing friends, stopped returning her mother's calls. She couldn't risk anyone knowing what she was doing. Her apartment became a fortress of evidence. Documents hidden in false bottom boxes, encrypted drives locked in a safe, backup copies stored in 3 different locations. She lost 15 pounds. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. Her hands shook constantly. You need to take care of yourself, James warned during one of their encrypted video calls. If you break down before we're ready to move, this all falls apart. I'm fine, she lied. No, you're not. But I understand. I was the same way when I was building my case from prison. The anger, the obsession, it's what keeps you going. But don't lose yourself in it. But Danielle was already lost. Every time she looked at Mitchell, she saw a predator who destroyed James, Marcus, and probably others. She saw a man who tried to destroy her, and she was going to take him down. In late November, Meridian announced their IPO date, December 15th. The company was going public with a valuation of $800 million. Based on the fraudulent financial reports Danielle had been forced to help prepare. Mitchell was ecstatic. This is it, Danielle. After this closes, you'll resign as planned, take your severance, and we'll both move on. You've done excellent work. The praise felt like acid on her skin. The IPO meant thousands of investors would buy stock in Meridian based on false information. They'd lose millions when the truth eventually came out. Mitchell would make a fortune. He'd positioned himself with stock options that would be worth tens of millions. "We need to move before the IPO," Danielle told James that night. "Once it goes through, the damage will be exponential." "Agreed. We have enough. It's time to bring in the FBI." They'd been in contact with an FBI agent specializing in securities fraud, a woman named Special Agent Lisa Torres. Torres had been very interested in the evidence they'd compiled, but had insisted on building an airtight case before making any moves. "If we go after Mitchell Crawford, we go once," she said. "He has expensive lawyers and powerful friends. We can't afford any mistakes." Now, with the IPO looming, it was time to act. The meeting with Agent Torres took place in a nondescript office building on a Saturday morning. Danielle brought everything: the encrypted drives, the recordings, the documents, the witness statements from Marcus. Torres reviewed it all with two other agents, her expression growing darker with each piece of evidence. "This is worse than I thought," Torres said. "This isn't just securities fraud. This is a pattern of criminal enterprise, spanning years, multiple victims, fabricated evidence, witness tampering. We're looking at RICO charges potentially." "How long before you can arrest him?" Danielle asked. "We need to coordinate with the SEC, get warrants, set up asset freezes so he can't move money offshore. 2 weeks minimum. The IPO is in 3 weeks.
"Then we'll stop the IPO." Torres looked at Danielle with something like sympathy. "I know this has been hell for you, but you're doing the right thing. Crawford has destroyed careers and lives. It ends now." Over the next week, things moved quickly. The FBI obtained warrants for Mitchell's financial records, his computers, his office. They placed him under surveillance. They froze the offshore accounts he'd set up in Danielle's name. She never had access to them anyway. They contacted the SEC, who put a hold on the Meridian IPO pending an investigation into accounting irregularities. And they prepared to move. December 8th started like any other day at Crawford & Associates. Danielle came to work at 8 a.m. Mitchell was already there, in a foul mood because the SEC had delayed the Meridian IPO. "This is a minor setback," he assured the staff during an emergency morning meeting. "The SEC is just doing routine review. We'll be cleared within days." He had no idea what was coming. At 10:15 a.m., FBI agents walked through the front door, 20 of them, with warrants. Agent Torres led the group, her badge held high. "Mitchell Crawford, you are under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and racketeering." The office went silent. Everyone froze. Mitchell's face went white, then red. "This is absurd. I want my lawyer." "You'll have plenty of time to call him from holding." Torres nodded to two agents, who moved to handcuff Mitchell. That's when Mitchell's eyes found Danielle across the room. The recognition was instant. He knew. She'd done this. You ungrateful—" "Save it for your trial," Torres interrupted. "Mitchell Crawford, you have the right to remain silent." As they led him out in handcuffs, past shocked colleagues and paralyzed staff, Danielle felt something she hadn't felt in months. Relief. The look on his face when he realized she'd beaten him, that's the moment we've been waiting for. If you're feeling that sweet justice, hit that like button. This story is far from over. The arrest made national news. Prominent Chicago accounting firm owner arrested in massive fraud scheme. The story had everything: lies, betrayal, forged evidence, multiple victims. Crawford & Associates imploded within days. Clients fled, employees quit. The firm that Mitchell had built over 20 years collapsed in less than a week.
But the story that really captured public attention was Danielle's. The media painted her as the hero who'd risked everything to expose corruption. "Whistleblower accountant prevents massive IPO fraud," read one headline. James Chen's story came out too. His conviction was overturned based on the new evidence showing Mitchell had framed him. He got his CPA license back. He even got a formal apology from the state. Marcus Rivera was vindicated as well, his reputation restored. But for Danielle, the victory felt hollow. She'd won, yes. Mitchell was facing 40-plus years in prison. The fraud had been exposed. Justice was being served. But she'd lost her job, her career at the firm, 7 years of her life. She was emotionally exhausted, financially drained from the legal process, and struggling to sleep at night. The trauma didn't just disappear because she'd won. Mitchell's trial began in March. His expensive lawyers tried everything, claiming he was framed, that Danielle was a disgruntled employee, that the evidence was fabricated. None of it worked. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the documents, the testimony from multiple victims, the offshore accounts in his name, the luxury purchases made right after fraudulent transactions cleared. Most damning was the video footage showing him accessing Danielle's computer late at night, manipulating files, creating the false evidence he'd tried to use against her. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge was merciless. "Mr. Crawford, you violated the trust of clients, employees, and colleagues. You destroyed careers to enrich yourself. You showed no remorse, no conscience. This court sentences you to 35 years in federal prison." Mitchell's face crumpled. At 48, 35 years was essentially a life sentence. As he was led away, he looked at Danielle one last time. She was sitting in the gallery with James and Marcus, the 3 survivors of his schemes. She met his eyes and didn't look away. He'd tried to destroy her. Instead, she'd destroyed him. But revenge, Danielle learned, wasn't the same as healing. In the months after Mitchell's sentencing, she struggled. She had nightmares about the fraudulent reports, about the offshore accounts, about being arrested instead of Mitchell. She had panic attacks in grocery stores. She couldn't trust anyone. Her therapist called it PTSD. What you went through was traumatic. You were targeted, manipulated, threatened. That doesn't just go away because you won. Danielle started attending trauma therapy twice a week. She reconnected with her mother, her friends. She started exercising, eating better, trying to reclaim the parts of herself she'd lost during those terrible months. James became a real friend. They met for coffee every week. 2 people who understood what it meant to be destroyed by someone you trusted and fight your way back. "The anger fades," James told her one afternoon. "What doesn't fade is knowing you stood up. You could have run or stayed silent, but you fought. That's something to be proud of." Danielle wasn't sure about pride yet, but she was learning to live with what had happened. The question everyone asked was, what would Danielle do now? She couldn't go back to traditional accounting. The Crawford & Associates experience had soured her on corporate finance, but she was only 31, with her whole career ahead of her. She thought about teaching, about consulting, about leaving finance entirely. Then Marcus called with a proposal. "I'm starting a forensic accounting firm," he said, "specializing in fraud detection and prevention. James is coming on as a partner. We want you too." "I don't know anything about forensic accounting." "You exposed one of the biggest fraud schemes in Illinois history. I'd say you're qualified. Plus, who better to spot fraud than someone who's been framed for it?" The idea appealed to Danielle, using her skills to help others, to prevent what happened to her from happening to someone else. "I'm in," she said. They called the firm Stone Chen Rivera Forensic Accounting. Within 6 months, they had more clients than they could handle. Companies wanted people who'd proven they couldn't be bought, couldn't be intimidated, couldn't be silenced. People who'd stared down fraud and won. While Danielle was building her new career, the legal battles continued. Mitchell's victims began filing civil suits to recover their losses.
James sued for wrongful imprisonment and defamation. Marcus sued for wrongful termination and blacklisting. Dozens of Meridian investors sued for securities fraud. Danielle sued for attempted fraud, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and about 10 other causes of action her lawyers could think of. Mitchell had hidden assets, properties in other people's names, offshore accounts. The forensic accountants working for the victims, including Danielle's own firm, found most of it. His lake house in Wisconsin, his investment properties in Florida, his art collection, his vintage car collection, everything was liquidated to pay settlements. Danielle's settlement was $2.3 million. James got $4.5 million for his wrongful imprisonment. Marcus got $1.8 million. The money didn't erase what happened, but it helped. Danielle donated half of hers to establish a legal defense fund for whistleblowers in financial fraud cases. People like her who risked everything to do the right thing and needed support to survive the process. This is what real justice looks like. Not just punishment for the guilty, but restoration for the victims. If this story is resonating with you, subscribe to see more stories of real people fighting back against injustice. The story wouldn't die. Danielle gave interviews to 60 Minutes, The Wall Street Journal, Forbes. She spoke at accounting conferences about fraud detection. She testified before Congress about strengthening whistleblower protections. She became, somewhat uncomfortably, famous. Danielle Stone, the accountant who brought down a fraudster, read one magazine profile. She hated the attention, but understood its value. Every interview, every article, every speaking engagement meant more people learned about how fraud happens, how to spot it, how to fight back. She also heard from other victims, people who'd been framed or scapegoated by bosses, who hadn't known how to fight back. She helped when she could, connecting them with lawyers, forensic accountants, FBI agents. Some cases went nowhere. The evidence was too weak or the perpetrators too powerful. But others succeeded. Small victories that added up. She was changing the system, one case at a time. 2 years after Mitchell's sentencing, Danielle got a letter. From prison. From Mitchell. She almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity won. Danielle, I know you have no reason to read this, but I needed to write it anyway. Not to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve that. Not to make excuses. There aren't any. Just to say, you were right. I spent 2 years here thinking I was the victim, that you'd betrayed me, that the system had failed me, that I was being punished for being successful. But therapy, mandatory, ironically, forced me to look at what I actually did. To you, to James, to Marcus, to all those investors. I destroyed lives because I was greedy and entitled and convinced I was smarter than everyone else. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand the magnitude of what I did. And I'm sorry, for whatever that's worth. Mitchell. Danielle read the letter 3 times. She didn't know if she believed him. Narcissists were good at performative remorse when it suited them. But a small part of her hoped it was real. Not for his sake, for hers. Because true remorse from him would mean his destruction had taught him something, meant something beyond just punishment. She didn't reply, but she kept the letter. Stone Chen Rivera Forensic Accounting became one of the most respected fraud detection firms in the Midwest. They handled major corporate cases, worked with law enforcement, trained other accountants in fraud detection. Danielle found purpose in the work. Every fraud scheme they uncovered, every scapegoat they exonerated, every whistleblower they protected. It felt like balancing scales.
They expanded to 15 employees, opened a second office in Indianapolis, published white papers on fraud prevention that became industry standards. And Danielle became a mentor to young accountants, especially women. She spoke at universities about ethics, about standing up to pressure, about trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. Don't be me, she'd tell them. Don't wait until you're trapped to act. If you see fraud, report it immediately. Don't let anyone convince you to stay quiet. Your integrity is worth more than any job. Some listened, some didn't, but she kept trying. Dating was complicated when your trauma was public record. Danielle went on a few dates, but explaining why she had PTSD from her old job and why she couldn't talk about it without crying tended to end things quickly. Then she met Aaron Chen, no relation to James, at a fraud prevention conference. He was a federal prosecutor specializing in white-collar crime. He'd followed her case, respected what she'd done. "I prosecute people like your old boss," he said over coffee after a panel discussion. "It's rare to meet someone who actually stopped them." They talked for hours about justice, about trauma, about the weight of doing the right thing when it costs everything. He got it. He'd seen enough cases to understand. They dated for a year before Aaron proposed. The wedding was small, intimate. James and Marcus were there, along with Agent Torres, who'd become a friend. Danielle wore a simple dress and cried through her vows. Not sad tears, grateful ones. She'd survived. She'd rebuilt. She'd found happiness again. Mitchell Crawford had tried to destroy her future. Instead, she'd built one he could never touch. 5 years after Mitchell's arrest, a documentary crew approached Danielle about telling her story. She was hesitant. She'd told it so many times already. "This is different," the director said. "This is about systemic fraud, about how whistleblowers are treated, about corporate accountability. Your story is the center, but it's bigger than just you." She agreed on the condition that James and Marcus were included, that the focus was on all victims of corporate fraud, not just her. The Frame Up, How One Woman Took Down a Fraudster, premiered at Sundance and got picked up by Netflix. It was devastating and inspiring in equal measure. The documentary included footage from the trial, interviews with FBI agents, analysis from fraud experts. But most powerful were the interviews with Danielle, James, and Marcus, talking about what it felt like to be targeted, betrayed, set up to take the fall. And talking about fighting back.
The documentary won awards. More importantly, it changed policy. Congress passed stronger whistleblower protections. The SEC established a dedicated fund for legal support. Accounting boards implemented new ethics requirements. Real change, born from terrible circumstances. This is the power of speaking up, of refusing to be silenced. If Danielle's story has moved you, if it's inspired you, show your support by subscribing. These are the stories that need to be told. 7 years after the arrest, Danielle received an unexpected invitation. The University of Chicago, her alma mater, wanted to give her an award for ethics in accounting. She almost declined. Awards felt strange when what she'd done was just survival. But James convinced her to go. "You're a role model now, whether you like it or not. Use it." At the ceremony, in front of hundreds of accounting students, Danielle told her story again. But this time, it felt different, more distant. The trauma had faded enough that she could see the arc of it clearly. "I didn't want to be a hero," she told the audience. "I just wanted to do my job honestly. When that became impossible, when my boss tried to frame me for his crimes, I had 2 choices: accept it or fight back. I fought, not because I was brave, but because I was angry and terrified and refused to let him win." She paused, looking at all those young faces. Some of you will face ethical dilemmas in your careers. Some will be minor, fudging a number here, overlooking something there. Some will be major, like what I faced.
In those moments, remember, your integrity is yours. No one can take it from you unless you give it away. And once you give it away, getting it back is almost impossible. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, a young woman approached her, a junior, nervous and earnest. "I'm interning at a firm downtown. I've been seeing some things in the books that don't make sense. My supervisor tells me not to worry about it, but I think something's wrong." Danielle felt the old familiar chill, history trying to repeat itself. She took the woman aside, got her contact information, and connected her with Agent Torres. Within 3 months, another fraud scheme was uncovered, another criminal was prosecuted, and that young woman avoided becoming another victim. The cycle was breaking. 10 years after Mitchell Crawford tried to destroy her life, Danielle stood in her firm's new office building. Stone Chen Rivera had 50 employees now, offices in 4 cities, and had helped expose over $300 million in corporate fraud. Mitchell was teaching forensic accounting at Northwestern. Marcus was on the board of the AICPA, helping shape national accounting standards. Mitchell was still in prison and would be for another 20 decades at least. And Danielle? She was exactly where she was supposed to be. She thought sometimes about what would have happened if she'd accepted Mitchell's ultimatum, if she'd stayed quiet, taken the severance, let him destroy her career in exchange for her freedom. She'd have been safe in the short term, but she'd have been destroyed anyway, just slowly from the inside out by the knowledge of what she'd allowed to happen. "You saved a lot of people," Aaron said that night over dinner at home. Their daughter was already asleep upstairs, 3 years old, named Hope. "I saved myself," Danielle corrected. "Everything else was just a side effect." But she knew that wasn't quite true. She'd saved herself first, yes, but in doing so, she'd saved James' reputation, protected Marcus's career, prevented thousands of investors from losing millions, and changed the system to protect future whistleblowers. The revenge she'd taken on Mitchell wasn't personal. It was justice. It was accountability. It was the natural consequence of his choices catching up to him. He'd tried to take everything she loved, her career, her reputation, her future. She'd taken everything he loved, his freedom, his wealth, his legacy. But unlike him, she'd built something beautiful from the ruins. Her firm helped people. Her daughter would grow up learning that standing up for what's right matters more than staying safe. Her marriage was built on honesty and shared values. Mitchell had a prison cell and the knowledge that he'd thrown away everything for money he'd never get to spend. The revenge wasn't in his suffering, though that was real and deserved. The revenge was in her thriving. This is what happens when someone tries to break you and you refuse to stay broken. You don't just survive, you build something better than they ever could have imagined. If Danielle's journey has inspired you, if it's shown you that fighting back is possible, hit that subscribe button. Share this story. Let it remind people that justice is possible, that the truth matters, and that one person standing up can change everything. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about stories of real courage. And remember, your integrity is the one thing no one can take from you unless you give it away. Hold on to it. Fight for it. It's worth more than any career, any amount of money, any comfortable lie. Until next time, stay strong. Some people think they can destroy you and walk away untouched. They're wrong. The truth always comes out. Justice always finds a way. And sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let them win.